Very nice.
Good morning, friends, and welcome to these talks of Friday morning. We are in for a interesting hour for the something which I know little of, and Eddy Knasel will now enlighten us on the history of Horfield meetings.
Okay. Have I got share screen enabled?
Yes.
It can be done.
I think you can see my screen now, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Right, well, I'm in the wrong window but on that, but never mind. So there we are. And I'll go full screen on that. There we are. So, friends, the background of this is that there was a friend of our meeting, Lorna Thompson, who before she left to live in York, I understand how she was feeling when she was leaving because I'm going through it myself, moving house. She passed a number of things on to me to keep. And one of them was this presentation about the history of Horfield Meeting House, which she had given to a number of people, I think not just Quakers. And I've looked at it, and I think an amazing research job on it, actually. So this is her. What I've done is I've actually simplified it. There were
1 second, I'm on Zoom.
There were 20 odd screens. So I got it down to I think 15 now. And this
You weren't. I've just...
there you go. So this is a picture of Horfield Meeting House as it is now. I think one of the things I'd point out there is the bus stop, which I think is a huge advantage for us. It means it's really quite easy to get to us, and people know where we are. At one point when I was an elder a while back, there was one person who wandered in from the bus stop and joined the meeting and didn't know what on earth was going on. She gave ministry about 5 times. In the end, I went over and sat down next to her and told her that you only meant to give ministry once, and she then ran out of the room, which was not actually the most successful thing I've ever done. But it says something about the value of actually having the position of the meeting house.
Yeah.
So I think one can say that presently Horfield Meeting House is very clearly part of Bristol. It wasn't always. And in fact, the next slide on Lorna's presentation shows a map from, I've forgotten exactly when, about 1840, I think, which quite clearly shows Horfield as a village in its own right. And it was decidedly outside Bristol. And in fact, I read a novel quite recently which talked about Horfield being separate from Bristol. Having said all that, Horfield Meeting is not really in Horfield. It's in an area this is another map that Lorna had included, which showed the new development, which was Thornley Park, which was basically a new estate. And in fact, our meeting house is about here within the Thornley Park estate, actually on the A38, which I think was always called the Bristol Road, the Gloucester Road in Bristol. And at the time, I'll move on the next screen, where our meeting house is, and this would have been the turn of the century, the turn of the 18th, 19th to 20th century, where our meeting house were 2 different buildings, 288 Gloucester Road and 300 Gloucester Road. 300 Gloucester Road is our present address, and 298 was known as Spring Cottage, which gives you a clue to the fact there's a reason why it's called Spring Cottage. There is in fact a spring underneath our building, and I'll talk about that a bit later. By the turn of the 20th century, both had become retail premises. 298 was a clothier outfit, and 300 a newsagents, and later a bootmaker. Lorna writes, this was typical of the Gloucester Road, which at that time was populated by small tradespeople and shopkeepers. By 1905, both properties belonged to Bristol and French Monthly Meeting. Rose Cottage became the Friends Committee rooms, and Spring Cottages was still let out to the outfitters. And here is the legal agreement between area meeting, well, monthly meeting as it was then, and the people who lived there and operated their shop. But Quakers weren't actually meeting there. They were meeting on the other side of the road at a mission hall that they bought from the Baptists, which, as you can see there, was known locally as the Iron Chapel. And apparently, Quakers who used it referred to it as the Tin Shack, which I think in itself gives you some sort of dissatisfaction with the building. So back in those days, Quakers used to get things done. And they decided they needed to build a proper meeting house there. And here's the original plans for it, the layout has not changed. Well, I'm get to the point where the layout did change a bit. You'll see that there's the main meeting room there, which at that time had a gallery. And there was also a classroom, which is where our warden presently lives. And Lorna's next thing was a photograph of the meeting house shortly after it was opened and built. And it was a big event, actually opening the meeting house. It got covered in the Friend. So here's the actual entry in the Friend. You probably haven't got time to read that, but there's a lot of interesting references in there to what was going on at the time. The one I'll pick out is that the total building cost about £3,000 in those days. So it's quite a lot of money even now. And the intention was that the meeting house will accommodate about 300 people. Now, Lorna notes that probably was possible at the time because the main meeting room was bigger than it is now, and there was the gallery as well. Can you imagine getting 300 people in a Quaker meeting house at the moment? What's next? So the next big development happened in 1961. And here's a diagram, a drawing of the place and a diagram of it. Now, and actually, I don't know if you can see it on this. The main change that had been made there was that the meeting room itself was made smaller, and we got the lobby that we now have. And somewhere along the line, the when it was first opened, it was known as Horfield Quaker Meeting House and Adult School. I didn't mention that. The adult school movement was an important thing that Quakers were part of. Adult schools are what we would now call not further education, but adult education. So for a long time, it was a centre for adult education. Later on, as that movement sort of passed out of existence, that became the meeting house flat. So that was the big development that happened in those days. Here's another photograph that Lorna included. I mentioned the spring, didn't I? But the spring is still there. And here's a culvert under the meeting house, which does give us some issues because there's an element of dampness in the whole building, which we and area meeting have to live with. So final photographs. I'm sorry this is not taking very long, but Lorna included some up-to-date photographs of the meeting. This is our garden, which Barney Smith played a big part in maintaining at the moment. And here are the latest developments. And I was actually around when this happened. We turned the very front of it into what we called a peace garden or peace patio. I think I described it on the radio once. The key element of that was there's one of the murals. All of the kind of murals that are there were actually developed by members of the meeting with the help of a friend from somewhere else. So all of that was put together by us ourselves. The big thing, and I think it's a great thing, is actually this mural of the testimonies, which I think itself is very good as sort of we do get peak passers by because of where we are, and I think it tells people something about what we're about in a very clear way. And all of these things were handmade and designed by individuals. So I'm afraid that's the end of the talk, friends. You're muted, Ray.
Sorry about that. So, one thing that friends usually tell me is I am hardly ever muted. I speak quite a lot. But one thing I saw in those notes there was someone whose name is earlier, someone whose name is well known for friends, and that was Roundtree.
Yes, I noticed that going through the notes. Yeah.
Yes.
As
Did
I
he
said,
come?
it was a big national event when it was actually opened.
Yeah. So he came and spoke. He wasn't a member of that meeting.
Yeah. Well, it was one of the Roundtrees anyway. They were quite a large family.
Mm.
And it was the first new meeting. It means, actually, reading this, looking at this, I had been told that Horfield and Medland meetings were opened about the same time, both as mission meetings. That clearly wasn't the case. Christopher.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's Bedminster was the other mission meeting, opened at roughly the same time, or started at the same time. But because Redland is quite a bit older, and was built because the carriage friends living in Clifton and Redland didn't want to get their servants out twice on a Sunday to drive down to Quaker Friars. So that's how we got Redland. And they, fortunately, having merged with French Monthly Meeting, they will be able to use some money that French had saved to pay for it. So,
I understood that actually part of the money for building Redland came from the kind of forced sale of what's now Central.
No, that would have been the refurbishment in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Quaker Friars wasn't sold until the 1950s, and then there was a fair amount of mucking about. I mean, it's I'm sure he won't mind me saying, but it's the reason that Paul Range, who comes from a family of being friends for a while now, will not join, is because of the rows and unpleasantness there was over the disposal of Central Meeting and or Friars, as the Quaker Friars as it was then. And I gather that Margaret Simpson, who was clerk of the area meeting at the time, they used to have their period of silence in the middle of the meeting because, they needed a time for friends to calm down a bit. So,
yeah,
yes,
I have actually back in the day when I was your monthly meeting clerk, I did actually read through minutes relating back to that period because there was something that came up that we needed to, and it's quite obvious from the minutes passed at that time, agreed at that time, that there was a lot of uproar about it.
Yeah, it's
and in fact, even in my time, people were talking about getting the Quakers Friars back.
Yes, I mean, I think, from a practical point of view, the cost of upkeep, rather than being a rich area meeting, we'd be a poor one if we had still had it. But anyway, I don't mind what happens because, 20 years' time, I should be too doddery to care. So, but
we're not really meant to be that attached to our meeting houses, are we?
no, we're not. But
Oh, Jonathan.
oh, look, you'll have to give the talk all over again.
Well, Jonathan can watch it on video at some point, can't he? And Jonathan, I'm very happy to let you have the PowerPoint presentation. I've just finished.
Oh,
Morning, Jonathan, and how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Sorry I'm late. I had to rush out to get a bit of hardware for a home crisis.
Oh, the homes, what will we do with them?
Yeah.
everyone is going to get sent. We will all have access via the link, won't we? To the talk. So although you have sadly missed it live, yeah. Well, then perhaps any particular questions or you felt like putting, Jonathan, to Eddie yourself. I'm sorry,
Well, that's right. I'll catch up with. Sorry, has it happened? The talk?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm afraid it has.
Okay, well that's all right.
Sorry, I don't know how to...
I'll get the recording. It's all right.
Mary.
Ed, you mentioned there's an underground stream. Does that have nasty implications for the burial ground?
We haven't got a burial ground.
No, you haven't. It's all right. I'm in French. Okay, forget it.
Yes, looking at the newspaper report, I noticed that it was one of the Cottrells who actually was the architect. And they're a family who, well, it's only recently that the last member of that family died. I was trying to think, there was another name right at the beginning. Oh, there was a Fry, I think, at least. So, yes, I might for once actually look at one of these recordings and try and pause it on the newspaper clipping and read it.
Well, I can.
Could you share it again?
Yeah, I can. I'm sure I can. If I manage to do this a bit better than I did last time. Yeah.
There we go.
Here you go.
Ah, here we are. Oh.
Oh, goodness. I see among those you have Fry, a Cottrell, a Sturge even.
Yeah, and Grace and Bobbits, who were involved in flour, I think, had a silo out at Avonmouth, so they were in it in a big way.
Interesting. Priscilla Fry.
I think it's really nice that he trusted also that a spirit of true fellowship would animate those connected with the place, that it might become a centre of light all around. I think, especially, bearing in mind the bus stop, I think that's lovely. It's very nice.
Oh, right, so it started with an adult school.
In fact, it was originally called Horfield Quaker Meeting House and Adult School.
Right, yeah.
And also it's got in that text there, it says near the bottom, just after Arnold S. Roundtree, on the first day, crowded meeting was held throughout the day. And they're still using that, not using Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or that they're still using the kind of the first day, which I've always been amused when friends have done that. That it was so different from many others.
Wow.
Well, there were members of this monthly meeting as it was then that was still using that language not all that long ago.
It's great to be able to read this. If you're up for sharing these slides, Eddie.
Oh, for sure.
Then I could put a link to the actual slideshow as a PDF in the notes underneath the video on YouTube, so people will be able to access it from anywhere, anytime, and see the slides properly if they're not able to see them so clearly on the video.
I'll email them to Patsy when we finish.
Brilliant. And a question about the culvert underneath. Has anything been done to sort of modify it, like fully enclosing it and putting in dehumidifiers and the like, or?
To be honest, I don't know. Judy would know.
Okay.
I've only been down there once, I think, ever.
Right. I'm just thinking about maintaining the quality of the building and not letting it deteriorate, whatever modern methods might be used to perhaps improve on what was done in the old days, or not.
I'm not. I mean, my memory of it is the slide isn't a particularly good one because it's tiled down there, like a bathroom would be.
Okay.
And I think basically, because of course the spring depends on the weather, so that it runs through a culvert most of the time, but there is space there for it to overflow without damaging the building, because I seem to remember, I think the whole cellar is tiled. Well, I'm sure, David, if you'd like to have a look down, Eddie or
Judy's the person.
Judy Brill would be happy to take you.
There's an interesting initiative that this would relate to, which is about helping community centres become more resilient to deal with potential shocks like floods. And it sounds to me like Horfield Meeting House would be a good candidate just for checking out as a case study of some sort. Perhaps I've been down there more often than some of the other people. It's okay, some bits are tarred, others just concreted, and some of it's pretty muddy. And when there's a lot of water, it does overflow, and there's an electric pump that's supposed to pump it out. But when the pump fails, then we get a flood. And there was one a year or so ago when the pump had failed. And it seems over time, a series of pumps has failed, because I've taken 3
busted ones down to the dump, or at least I took them down to the metal recycling place to try and get some money for the copper that's in it, but I only got 50p. And just for David's amusement, I did do some calculations as to whether the flow of water through there is sufficient to have a water sourced heat pump, but it's nothing like enough.
So probably not a water turbine either then.
No, I don't think so.
Right.
So sorry to interrupt. I got a possible technical hitch. David, is it a problem that my screen is still saying recording calls?
Oh,
Is it still recording at your end?
it may be that we're making 2 recordings. I believe that it's recording at my end.
Oh, that's what matters. Oh, that's all that matters. Don't worry. Sorry.
I don't want to try stopping it now to see if it stops.
Better to have 2 than not to have 1. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're doing okay.
May I highlight another little thing which I've just noticed in the piece of that is being shown here, and it says that development occurred and the new building started practically free from debt. The place has been called a glorified public house, which has rather different connotations of that today than I think it did then. With Quakers' ideas on not to do with nothing should be done with alcohol on their premises, and it says a glorified public.
And there is, of course,
how words change.
The opposite now. So.
But they're practically free of debt, which I think is another good thing, because that type of thing isn't a lot of buildings are new, whatever they are. It's not practically free of debt a lot of the time. They start with an enormous amount of money owed.
Yeah. Sometimes the simplest of throwaway remarks create an impression that seems worth following up on. I love the idea of positioning the buildings so that Quakers wouldn't need to get their servants out twice on a Sunday. It creates a completely different picture of society in those days, which one I'd love you to talk more about that, Eddie, what the Quaker culture was like, and obviously, a building would be debt free if you've got a bunch of people attending who've all got servants, and the rest of it.
It was Christopher's remark about Redland, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, years ago, we found among some papers in the cellar at Redland, there was a little book about, from the catering committee, about a social event they arranged there. And they'd got in potted palm trees, and I think they'd laid carpets and all sorts of things. And then there's a lovely little note at the bottom: too much bread and butter, not enough cake. So Quakers and their teas.
Right.
So we used to over cater back in those days as well.
Yes.
The name that strikes me quite strongly there is Grace.
Grace.
Presumably nothing to do with W.G. Grace or any of the other Graces that were involved in Gloucester County Cricket Club.
J.E. and Wilfred.
Those aren't names that ring a bell with me, because I have read some of the history of the Grace family, WG's surgery was in Easton, but all the rest were based around South Gloucester, Kingswood, Thornbury, Downend, that area. Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, could I interrupt? Because I'm a patient at Montpellier Health, and there's a pub beside Montpellier Health that has some connection with WC Grace. So I wonder if, in fact, the Grace is related to the cricketer.
I think the Quaker Graces were based in Clifton. I seem to remember one of them had a house overlooking the Downs that way. So no, I think they were two separate families.
Okay.
The thing which I found also with this little report here emphasizes something which is nearly unique to Quakers' religion of that day, is that the prominence of females rather than males very strong within Quakers a lot of that time. And would you say that was with this very much in Horfield or as well those times?
Well, it's interesting because I think presently Horfield is different from most of the other Bristol meetings in that we have a majority of women. I'm sure that's a coincidence, really.
Historically, Christopher?
Well, I mean, sorry, I was looking up Graces at the times, so I wasn't listening to what was said. But I mean, currently in the society, 70% roughly of the membership is women rather than men. Central meeting is very strange in the fact that we tend to have more men than women, but yeah.
We haven't comments as well from animals. But yeah.
Can I say something?
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's Hattie here in North Bristol. I'm a member of Redland, and I think we've got more women than men there. What was I going to say about? Yes, about the sort of cooperation between meeting houses, really. I mean, we are a friendly bunch, and I just, talking today about Horfield, okay, you're talking about the building. On the other hand, I'm thinking, I've never been to a meeting in any other place in Bristol, and we've got 5 houses, and it just strikes me that it might be a nice thing to initiate a sort of formal cooperative approach at some stage or another in some way. We had a peace feast at Redland. It was very well attended, and I just wasn't aware of, I don't know if it was advertised to the other meeting houses, and there's sort of spirit of cooperation. Anyway, that's the kind of thought that's occurred to me.
Yes, it's quite sad otherwise, isn't it? What tends to happen is the only time I'm aware of seeing members from other meetings is when someone dies. we go to a funeral, and you know, so it would be, but you know, I can imagine some really nice occasions where we took it in turns, perhaps to host. That's a term.
And I mean, I suppose I've met people from other meeting houses at conference, for instance, when we've had a couple of wonderful conferences down at Central Meeting. Anyway, I'm looking forward to another event.
I would point out the area meeting and session rotates between the different meeting houses. And that is a great time to meet people from other meetings. And when I joined, well, before I joined, when I was thinking of joining, it's a long time ago now, it was put upon me that I should go and visit other meetings. And I think the general view in the literature, Quaker literature, is that you should visit other meetings. In fact, that kind of I think it's important that we do that. And you know, we are, you know, the individual meetings are not separate things legally at all. It's like illusion that we have.
Well, on that topic, there may be a bit more technology we can use here. I was for a little while, there was a local sustainability group that had like a dozen people on it. It took me some time to discover that even existed. And when I went to about the third meeting, it was seemed to be taking it upon itself to dissolve because there wasn't much going on and there wasn't much to do. And I was thinking, oh, you mean apart from decarbonize Bristol, which is about a £10 billion project. And then the sustainability group collapsed to just 2 or 3 people meeting out of Central. And then just a few days ago, I discovered that there's a group called Quaker Support for Climate Action on WhatsApp with about 150 members, mostly based in London. And you know, you can join it with the click of a button, and then you get flooded with information, but it's much more timely and appropriate and paced than getting the notices at a Quaker meeting, which we don't read out anymore anyway. And something could be done, I would have thought, which would be a similar group, just Bristol Quakers, and we already have this for the Earthquakes Action Group, which is a Quaker group, and for the Bristol Climate Choir, which is a sort of Quaker earthquake spin-out, and now has climate choirs across the country. So I think we tend to use social media in a haphazard rather than a planned or strategic way. And I think, you know, if you just had a local Quaker WhatsApp group, which people can join and then ignore all they like, or tap into as the messages come through, then we would know what's on, and we would be able to report, you know, that there's a discussion group this Friday. I mean, only half a dozen people get notices that we have a discussion group, and so on. End of rant. But maybe this is a suggestion to pick up as a discussion somewhere sometime.
After that, I would like to ask you a question, Eddie. You said, did you state that you were moving?
I am moving, yes.
Where to?
Well, not away from Bristol, just to Henleys, essentially.
Right, right.
As some friends will know, I have mobility issues, and the house that we're presently living in was really bought when we had 2 teenagers living with us, and it's just too big. We actually have a 180-foot garden, which is, in fact, our house is now essentially, we have a buyer, and we're actually only selling half of it because we're selling off the other half separately with planning permission, if we ever get the planning permission. The thing is, reason I mentioned mobility is that I find the pavements around here off the Gloucester Road really difficult, and one of the advantages of moving to Henleys, or where we're moving anyway, is that there aren't any trees destroying the pavements, which is very much the case where I live. The other day I was walking down the Gloucester Road, which is a very hilly, and the pavements are pretty much neglected thing, and a little old lady with a stick came up and offered to help me.
Bless you.
And I realised afterwards that, in fact, what she was suggesting, shall we help each other?
Sounds a good idea. So what meeting will you be going to after
I'll
that?
still be Horfield. I mean, there are people from Horfield who are further out. One of the things I found when I first got involved in the church work was that's unusual about Quakers is that people, the locations, we have much less connected with our neighbourhoods than conventional churches are. And I put that down to the fact that we were unwelcome. Essentially, we had to do things ourselves. So just explaining my personal situation at the moment, quite apart from the fact that we're moving, my wife is having major surgery this month, and she'll be laid up for a month. So
yes, well,
feeling a bit absent-minded at the moment. That maybe explains some of it. Yeah.
Well, I think I can safely say we all send our best regards to your wife and hope she gets better soon.
Absolutely, yeah.
In that respect, but going forward to places like Horfield, have Horfield any idea of what is going to happen, what they want to happen in the future? We spoke about the past of the Horfield, what about the future of Horfield?
Well, as clerk, I can say that we took the whole business of our whatever it was project, looking at the future very seriously, and the key thing we decided was that we want to keep our meeting house, because that was what that review was really about. Because there was a suggestion, which I never fully understood, that it would be better for the environment if we stopped owning meeting houses and sold them off to somebody else, and basically they took the responsibility for it. I'm caricaturing. I'm sure there's a bit more to the proposal in the first place. But yeah, I think in terms of looking to the future, we are very happy with our meeting house. It serves a tremendously good function for us, not just for us, but for the community. Julie Brill has calculated that the huge percentage of people living in and around the meeting house have actually been in it at some time. Almost all of the children have, because they will be coming to. The difficulty we have is actually not selling the meeting house, as not letting the meeting house out, but actually the fact that there's no spaces for people. Judy does a fantastic job of making sure, in fact, we make a net contribution to the area meeting at the moment with our hirings and whatever. So I think basically looking at the future, the big other thing that we came up with was that we ought to be a bit more open to actually making an effort to get more people to come. I felt for a long time, I mean, one of the things that makes us different from others, I feel, is that we keep our light under a bushel.
Always.
And I think Horfield made a resolution to let a few chinks of it out more than we have done in the past. So, yeah, I mean, it's not. I think there are historic reasons why Quakers are like that. We were oppressed, and in fact, I got contacted a few years ago from somebody called the New Cathars, because he thought we might. I have no idea who they are, but you've heard of the Cathars.
Yeah.
essentially a French group who were actually chased to extinction. And,
Oh, yes.
and he thought we might feel like kindred spirits with them, but I don't think we're oppressed anymore. Gone are the days when you can find it in Faith and Practice, where the mayor of Bristol wanted to deport us all to Barbados.
Wow.
Not Rwanda.
No, but I think it wasn't very different. I think the undertone of that was he thought we ought to be sold into slavery.
Yeah.
I think more than anything other than these days is that Quakers are misunderstood, because still a lot of people I have met outside of a Quaker, they say, "What are they? I haven't heard of them. You know, what do they do? Are they that American lot?"
Exactly.
You go, no.
Well, if we were doing it properly in terms of where Quakers are, most Quakers in the world live in Kenya.
Oh gosh, yes.
And American, what America has, I don't know, dozens of, well, significantly more than one yearly meeting, and they vary enormously in their approaches. There are yearly meetings that employ pastors.
Yeah.
When I was in the Holy Land, of what, 10 years, no, more than 10 years ago now, I met a Quaker pastor from the States who had been sacked while he was in Israel.
Oh gosh.
His meeting had written to him saying, "Don't come back."
My goodness. But you know, one wonders about that. You know, the friend is mistaken.
Well, yes, I think you know the thing that strikes me is that, in fact, when you sit down and talk to American Quakers, they're very, very similar to us. And we have it's the motto of Churches Together is that the things that keep us apart, the things we share are more important than things that keep us apart. And I think that's true about Quakers as well. And I kind of immediately find myself with kindred spirits when I speak to American Quakers and whatever.
I think the saddest part of some Quakers, you know, in Africa, and some Quakers in America even, is the not acceptance of gay, transgender type of people. There's still that, you know, especially in Africa, because when one world meeting went there, and the subject of the British Quakers accept the gay transgender thing as we accept everybody, you know. And if you're you can get married in a Quaker church, a Quaker community, if you are marrying your whoever you wish. But still in a lot of communities in Africa and some parts of America, that is still something which is not accepted, and that is the only thing which makes me sad about non-British Quakers. But there you are. I don't wish to end on a sad point, but you know, Quakers in Central, the meeting house is overflowing with different type of people. At the moment, we have the amusing thing of having to turn groups away because we don't have the space for them, and kind of say, "Have you tried so-and-so meeting or Redland meeting or Horfield meeting or something like this?" And I think this is a good thing.
I would say something. The effects of COVID have not all been bad, and there certainly were people coming to us who we'd never met before. To the extent there are now people at Horfield, and I don't know who their names are. It's not just I've forgotten the people's names, which happens a lot with me nowadays. But there was a bit.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. But I think you're right. Yes, but be fair to American Quakers. I think I was originally an American citizen. My father was American. Well, I was originally a joint national. I have, in fact, got an American passport for when I was a kid. American culture, it's wrong to talk about it as being one culture in America. There are big differences in different parts of the States, which I think is being reflected in their politics at the moment. But there is, there is a really strong kind of legacy of the Civil War, I would say, where there is a. Well, last time I was over, I was talking to one of my cousins, the guy I actually like and know quite well, and we went out at a bar together, and at that point, black churches in the States were being burnt. It wasn't very long ago, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, "Well, those guys they complain too much." And I just the level of unconscious racism in America, well, certainly in the Midwest, which is where my family are from, is something that's completely foreign to us. I don't think in Britain we have much of that. Where you can tell racist in Britain, you know that because they're quite open about it. It's not unconscious in quite the same way. Anyway, friends, is it all right if I stop the share now?
Oh yeah, that's we're in discussion.
Yeah.
Ray, will you be closing the meeting?
Sorry, I had a bit of drilling from outside, so I muted. Anyway, sorry, David.
Yeah, just to say, I think this is extremely useful and interesting, and a little bit of introspection on the history of Quakers and impact in society. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Would want to thank you, Eddie, for just starting it off with whatever slides you had, but we have segued into bits of Quaker history, impact on the community, and so on, and a note that there's, well, even at Central Meeting we had about 5 new people on Sunday. We had just enough chairs out, and people kept coming into the meeting, and very interesting discussions afterwards that competed with a business meeting for membership. So we're somehow getting perhaps older, but also more diverse and having an influence in the community. Because Quaker values, it's may have been outcasts at one point, but Quakers are now seen, if misunderstood, Quakers are at the very least understood to be social innovators in quite extraordinary ways, actually. I hope that this can be continued and built on, and certainly the idea of people from one meeting up with others, and maybe a shared chat group and calendar would allow that to happen much more easily, because I don't hear about what's going on in other meetings, but if I've got something whizzing past on my screen which is, Thursday's meeting at whatever was great, and next Friday we're having this, that would be really interesting.
Or a meeting newsletter, perhaps?
Well, my thought exactly. But we do have a WhatsApp within Horfield, which is I think really very useful.
Right. Well, there could be that WhatsApp have announced they've got a new feature, which is communities.
Right.
And communities can include many groups, which is kind of cute, because groups can then join communities. And if you're a member of a Bristol Quaker group, then you can pop out and, oh, there's all these other ones. So there could be a Bristol Quakers community and maybe a Bristol Quaker chat within the community, easily to discover, and other Quaker groups could join the community. Not to diminish their conversations, but so that members can look around and see what else is going on.
I can suddenly see a friend to develop such things, and his name begins with David. So,
well, I'm very wary of becoming a one-man group. I'm not, I have some skills, but I think the skills are best applied when I'm applying them within a larger group, like posting the YouTube stuff for this discussion group and not organizing the discussion group. And it may be that we should be forming some kind of interfaith group amongst Bristol Quakers.
I think it's really good that Central have made this open to the whole area meeting, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's a discussion to keep going. Maybe we can schedule something within the discussion group that would take this deeper.
A seed. Sorry, Christopher, do carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say what do we have next week, which you were probably just about to tell us anyway.
It is the lovely Patsy who's going to tell us.
Unfortunately.
Oh, well, next week we are continuing our series of interviews. I am going to take the chair in order to interview David, who is going to tell us about his life and his career and his interests. And I think that will be a very exciting talk. I'm greatly looking forward to it. So that will be next week.
And perhaps we can devote a reasonable chunk of a discussion into Wither Quakers in Bristol.
Right then, folks. Any more questions or comments for Eddy? No. Right. Well, thank you very much, Eddy, for, as I said earlier, an interesting talk on a lot of Horfield, which certainly I didn't know about, and I'm sure others didn't also.
Yeah, really great. We've already had one talk from Eddy, which I will link in the discussion, and I hope that these two will be the first of many.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether Eddy has contact details for Lorna. I could tell her that he's used her talk and how interesting we found it.
I
even link her to the
yeah. Well, yeah. I don't, but I can inquire, and I think it would be to do. Yeah. I'm really glad.
And Hartford Oaks, isn't
all this material.
Yeah, it's good.
Is it Hartford Oaks? Yeah.
I think the labour of love putting it together, I think.
Right. Okay.
Okay, folks.
Thank you very much, Ben. I will email the presentation to you within the next few minutes, Patsy.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.